Hi, and welcome to today's Facebook Live demo offered by NetBees. Today we'll talk about how DNS cache works. So before talking about DNS cache, let's see how the regular DNS resolution process works and why is it needed. So domain name service, that stands for DNS, is that service that is needed for any host, for any internet host to connect to another host via a fully qualified domain name. So a fully qualified domain name can be, for example, www.google.com, and that's something that computers cannot use to connect to establish a connection between each other. They will need an IP address that allow them to create a network connection. So to do that, to translate a fully qualified domain name into an IP address, there is the DNS service in place for that specific reason. So as you can see in this diagram, what happens when you type in your browser www.google.com, your computer in the background will perform a DNS query with whatever DNS servers it was configured with, and then once the DNS server respond with an IP address, your computer will establish a connection via using that IP address to the destination web server, which in this case is www.google.com. DNS cache work by storing those results in a DNS cache, which is a local file or database, with a goal to improve the kind of web browsing or time to access a website. And DNS caching is something that is enabled on most Windows on Mac OS X operating systems and is not enabled by default on Linux. And generally, like Windows works that successful DNS queries are stored for 1 day, while unsuccessful for 5 minutes. And again, the benefit is really improve speed time to access web pages. So let's see what is the average DNS query and how is that related, how does that impact HTTP performance, that is browsing, internet browsing. So we did some tests with the NetBees. We have on one instance 25 sensors that regularly do HTTP checks, DNS checks, and so on. And what we found is that the average DNS query overall falls around 50 milliseconds, with peaks around 150 and 200 milliseconds. So when you see this timing, you may ask yourself, how does that impact kind of the average website browsing, because the average page loading time is 1 or 2 seconds. But if you think that the average web page has around 100 elements that require a DNS query, then you can clearly understand how things add up in the internet performance. So really DNS caching work and improves the internet browsing experience. And in fact, if you see here in this HTTP test that we configure and is ongoing running on a virtual agent, you can see that when we enable the DNS caching at 1400, the time here on the x-axis, you could see how suddenly the HTTP get time for the YouTube page decreased, clearly proving that actually DNS caching really improves things. Of course, this is like, if you can see from the y-axis, the improvement is very minimal, but it's about like 20% or 25% improvement. So if you see on a page with more content, with more elements, you could see how, again, DNS caching can really help increasing your internet speed. So there might be some situation where DNS caching might be causing some problems or might not help you during your troubleshooting efforts. For example, if you have old stale entries and you're troubleshooting a connectivity problem, maybe because the DNS entry changed, what you want to do is clear the DNS cache. So on operating systems that have this function enabled by default, what you do in the case of Windows or Mac, in Windows you would open your command prompt, while on Mac OS X the terminal, and then you can type these commands to clear the DNS cache. Linux, as I was saying before, by default is not installed. So if you have that service installed, which is called nscd, you would have to stop and restart the service, thus clearing the DNS cache. With that, that concludes today's Facebook Live demo by NetBees. I wanted to thank you for your time and have a great weekend.